Welcome. Aquí estamos. Soy Joe Wright, el gringo más mexicano. I am here with Pat Risner, the president of the Hermosa Project for South32, and the community specialist, one of my good friends, Sandra Moraga. How are you doing? Good. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, great. Thank you for having us.
Great. No, thank you for being on here with us, and taking this opportunity to talk to me and to the community about what you guys have going on. We've got a lot of things that we're going to talk about, of course, but let's start with an introduction. Of course, I introduce you, Pat Risner, Sandra Moraga, but let's introduce what South32 is and the Hermosa Project.
Sure.
I'll refer that to you guys.
Yeah, no, thank you. So the Hermosa Project is a critical minerals mining development in the Patagonia Mountains south of Patagonia. It's the only mine development project in the United States that could produce two U.S. federally designated critical minerals, being zinc and manganese, and the only project that could produce a domestic source of battery-grade manganese for the electric vehicle supply chain.
Okay, great. So now you mentioned these critical minerals, and you mentioned manganese, but what are these minerals really for? I mean, electric vehicles, batteries, how does that work?
Yeah. So these minerals are really essential as we think about the bold decarbonization targets that our country has set. So to put more electric vehicles on the road, generate more electricity with renewables. Zinc is primarily used to galvanize steel, so really coating anything made in steel so that it doesn't rust. So wind turbines, electrical power infrastructure for renewable energy, bridges, buildings, those sorts of things. The manganese is primarily for electric vehicle batteries. We'll also produce silver as a byproduct, which is used in solar panels.
Of course, okay. And now the background with the Hermosa Project here locally, why Patagonia? Where's it all playing?
Yeah, so back in the sort of mid-2010s, the prior owner of the project discovered the zinc resource through some ongoing exploration. It's one of the largest undeveloped resources of zinc in the world. Wow. And this is really the only domestic manganese deposit that has the potential, as I said, to provide battery-grade manganese. So we follow the geology, where the resources might be, and that's really what's driven the location and why we're there. But primarily the nation's pull to create domestic supply chains. We're 100% reliant on Chinese sources for battery-grade manganese. All the manganese in the world comes from China, and we're 87% reliant on foreign sources for zinc.
All right.
So we can provide these minerals and create jobs in Santa Cruz County.
Okay, through, like you said, a domestic supply chain for this. Okay, so Sandra, perdón, ¿no? Se me olvidó, ¿no? Lo más importante es que sí somos bilingual, ¿no? So we want to make sure that this information is available for everybody in the community. And we said we weren't going to go long between, but we did. Perdón, Sandra. So real quick, yes. So let's, pues primero introducciones, ¿no?
Claro que sí. Pues mira, primero que nada un saludo a toda la comunidad del condado de Santa Cruz. Mi nombre, como ya lo mencionaste, es Sandra Moraga y estoy recientemente integrada a la compañía South32. Tengo escasos 2 meses, así que estamos apoyando mucho el proyecto. Me gustaría hablar un poquito de lo que es la compañía. La compañía es una compañía global donde tiene sus oficinas principales en Australia, en Perth, pero pues tiene proyectos por todo el mundo, ¿no? El del que vamos a hablar el día de hoy está aquí en las montañas de Patagonia, donde se han explorado para ciertos minerales, el manganeso siendo uno de ellos. Otros minerales que se encuentran ahí viene siendo el zinc, también hay plata y también hay plomo. Como comentaba el señor Pat Risner, es de que estos minerales ahorita están siendo esenciales para lograr lo que viene siendo una energía limpia, ¿no? El gobierno de Estados Unidos ya sabemos que ha puesto unas metas muy altas, muy elevadas para poder lograr esos logros y estos minerales son componentes esenciales para eso, ¿no? Como estaba mencionando, el manganeso se utiliza para cubrir ciertos elementos, por ejemplo, de las turbinas, ahorita está en lo que viene siendo los vehículos eléctricos y tantos otros productos, ¿no? No recuerdo cuál era el otro comentario, pero definitivamente estamos aquí en la mina, lo que es la operación, va a estar en las montañas de Patagonia, donde ya hay historia de otras minas, ¿no? que han estado ahí.
Sí, claro. So, no, eso fue. No,
Excelente.
Está bien, muy bien. Now, of course, we have to acknowledge that there's some controversy currently, specifically regarding a proposed rezoning that has now been revoked in Rio Rico, and some confusion as to what that would mean. We're going to get into that later, but before we get that, I want to talk about South 32. So, since you guys, especially since the Hermosa Project has started and things like that, you guys have done a lot of community investment. So there were a few things that I wanted to hit on specifically is schools. One of the questions is, are you going to be training people? Is there a plan to essentially create a direct line from schools to mine? Or what is the plan? I mean, you guys have talked about, we'll get to the employment part. Schools first.
Yeah, right. So one of the fundamental things that guides us at South 32 is our purpose. And our purpose talks about, through natural resource development, improving people's lives for now and generations to come. And so what is part of that is the communities where we operate, there has to be shared value for the community as well. And so one element of that is social investment, and one element in social investment is supporting education, because we believe that is the key long-term to improving people's lives. So we've been involved in a number of programs for the last 4.5 years since we've been here. These are not new, but part of what we wanted to do is focus on upskilling STEM skills of the future, robotics, things like that, and getting into the middle school level where you can really generate an interest for people to start pursuing STEM careers, where you have a lot of underrepresented demographics in those careers. And so our investment there is more about lifting the community up in general. It's not necessarily self-serving or to point people to work for us. We absolutely want local employment. We've made a commitment. We want greater than 80% of our workforce to be people that live in the county today. We think those programs can support that in the professional roles, but we do that really to deliver on our purpose and to create that shared value of lifting communities up.
Of course. Now, some of those, I mean, you mentioned some of the programs, but some of the programs that you were talking about, I want to say specifically, like Tecnolochicas, the robotics, mentioned robotics, things that Sandra and I were just talking about. And those are all great community things that need that funding for those specific reasons, to get those demographics into fields where they're underrepresented. Sandra, ¿no? La inversión a la comunidad que está haciendo South 32 están invirtiendo mucho, ¿no? A la comunidad.
Así es. Mira, antes yo, en mi posición anterior, yo escuchaba mucho de que el programa Tecnolochicas, que robóticas, y yo veía esa inversión como una inversión para la comunidad, para nuestros jóvenes, ¿verdad? Independientemente de donde ellos decidieran irse a estudiar. Ahora que estoy de este lado con la compañía, veo en verdad el interés por crear esos valores unidos para la comunidad. Entonces, cuando se invierte en un programa como Tecnolochicas, que expone a jovencitas a todo lo que venga a hacer con carreras en ciencias, matemáticas, y que ellas puedan tener una oportunidad de decir, bueno, eso es algo que a mí me interesa, voy a continuar en ese medio. Y ya tenemos historias de éxito, por lo menos de una chica que yo sé, que conocí personalmente, que estaba en ese programa de Tecnolochicas, y ahorita ella ya se va a la universidad a estudiar las ciencias, ¿no? Wow. Entonces, independientemente, la inversión en las escuelas es para el beneficio de la comunidad, de nuestras familias, de nuestros jóvenes, y no es necesariamente para decir, los vamos a entrenar para que vengan a trabajar a la mina. No, es para que ellos se beneficien. Claro que si a alguien le interesa la minería, con todo gusto, ¿verdad? Pero eso muestra como los valores que tiene la compañía de invertir en la comunidad, en educación sobre todo, algo que es tan esencial para nosotros, de manera desinteresada. Ese es uno de los valores de la compañía que yo en verdad he estado muy contenta de ver, y no nomás de verlo de fuera, sino de adentro también.
Muy bien, muy bien. Gracias, Sandra. So that leads directly into the employment aspect of this. You mentioned the 80%. That's a number that I've heard and seen thrown around from you guys about the workforce, how much percent of the community you want to be that comprise the Hermosa Project workforce. What does that look like? And I mean, how does that relate to the future plans?
Right. The immediate impact of that, or I guess what we should start to see sooner rather than later, is we've developed a local workforce development strategy. So how we achieve that, and really what that strategy covers, is how do we start to stand up programs in Santa Cruz County to train people that live in Santa Cruz County today for the skills that will be needed to fill the roles. Okay. The beauty of the Hermosa Project in terms of our ability to employ more people locally is because we will use so much automation and technology. We'll get to the remote operating center when we talk about.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a question I had
right.
down the road. Yeah,
so
sure.
Vast majority of of the mining operation can be operated remotely or automated, and so what that allows us to do is employ a lot of people, not necessarily at the mine site, but at areas in a remote operating center, like a command center. And so we can train people that have no mining experience to do those jobs. I've been involved in setting them up before, and we can therefore get people to come into the workforce that maybe might not have been considered for mining type jobs before, people that have no mining experience. If we locate it in the right place, we want more female representation in our workforce.
Of course.
The female representation in our workforce right now is already about 3 to 4 times the industry average, and we want to grow that. So because of the use of technology and innovation, it makes it easier. We can train existing residents that have no experience to do those jobs, and their high-tech skills that are transferable beyond the mining industry. So we're going to be standing up programs to train and create that local workforce over time.
Now, one thing that I would like to say personally is I've noticed that you guys have an eye for talent, for local talent. I mean, you hired Sandra, who's incredible. Recently hired Jeanette Sanchez, who's another great friend of mine. You guys have a good eye for who to hire. So good job there.
No, I mean, we're very fortunate that we need to increase that. We will increase that. That's part of that purpose, for there to be shared value and to improve people's lives for generations to come. We've got to providing employment, providing skills and training is a big part of that. And that's part of the legacy that can be left behind. I mean, if we stand up skills training programs in this county, those can survive our existence, the mine, and be there to lift up families through providing skills, life skills and occupational skills for a long period of time. But yeah, we're very fortunate to have Sandra, and we hope we can find 700 or 800 more of people of this type, and we think the culture in this community really supports where we want to go culturally. I've talked about this a number of times. It's a great fit, and so we think having a local workforce made up mostly of people from Santa Cruz County today creates the right kind of business that we want to have too.
Great, and of course a rising tide lifts all ships, right?
Right.
So that leads into,
Sí,
perdón, Sandra, perdón.
Qué bueno que me dices la palabra, porque quería regresarme un poquito a lo que estamos hablando de la inversión para la comunidad, porque nos enfocamos un poquito en lo que es educación, pero esa inversión va mucho más allá, ¿verdad? Por ejemplo, estábamos hablando del Nogales Bicycle Classic. ¿De veras?
Sí, ya voy a llegar a ese punto.
Es que no quiero que se me pasen esos, porque para mí es muy importante esos temas, ¿verdad?
Sí, claro.
Donde hemos puesto el enfoque y donde esperamos continuar. Pero hablando de la fuerza laboral, como lo comentaba el señor Risner, el potencial que hay aquí en Santa Cruz, yo siempre lo he reconocido. Uno de los intereses de la compañía es poder reclutar en la fuerza laboral más mujeres. Ahora, hablemos de, por ejemplo, cómo se prepararía la comunidad para poder trabajar, ¿no? en la compañía de South32. muchos de las posiciones que se van a requerir, pues no tiene que ser técnico porque se va a proveer la capacitación para eso. Capacitación en ciertas áreas técnicas y todas esas habilidades que las personas pueden crecer en ello y aumentar conocimiento, ¿verdad? Pero esa es la meta de agarrar 80% de la fuerza laboral de aquí de Santa Cruz County. Y creo que de eso se trató el segmento anterior. Ya no me voy a adelantar. Así es.
Okay, so yeah, that actually leads right into where I was going, which is, again, a rising tide lifts all ships, right? So the investment in the community goes beyond the schools. It goes beyond the education to the nonprofits, like she just mentioned, the Nogales Bicycle Classic, the Nogales Marathon put on by Cero Estrés, and many more, of course. So what are the plans for future community investment, and how does the success of the mine ripple through the community beyond just the employees of the mine?
Right. So, I mean, we're involved in a number of other things around supporting the county's vision for longer-term economic development. What's important, this is a non-renewable resource. It does get to the end of its life at some point, even if it's many decades in the future.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do is, while we're here, while we're operating, be a part of planning and making investments in the community that can be long-term and sustainable beyond the existence of these natural resources.
No, you're the one getting the head in the interview. That's another question I was going to ask later too. So that's good that we're addressing it now. Yeah. But good, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one of the things that I really wanted to talk about was that type of sustainable growth. Mm-hmm. We will get into that more when we actually talk about mining operations. But thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, but I think it'll be a collaboration. I mean, we don't sit here and purport to know exactly what the community needs are. Through community engagement, stakeholder engagement, we learn, we hear about what the needs are, be it infrastructure, services, and we will make investments in those areas to create that shared value. Okay. But we also want things that will be sustainable and provide benefits beyond the time in which we're here.
Okay, great.
Como lo comentamos, no se sabe exactamente qué son las necesidades de la comunidad, todas, ¿no? Se pueden reconocer algunas, pero por medio de colaboraciones con los diferentes grupos en la comunidad, se pueden identificar áreas donde se pueda contribuir. Como dice la vida de la mina, eventualmente va a llegar a su final, pero que es la legacía que se queda por medio de esas colaboraciones, ¿verdad? Y contribuciones para la comunidad. Entonces, es un esfuerzo de ambas partes. Claro que si alguien tiene algo que quieran aportar o que quieran traer a nuestra atención, con toda confianza. Voy a aprovechar para decirles dónde está mi oficina.
Okay,
¿Te parece?
Muy bien.
Claro. Ahorita estamos entrevistando aquí, como dijiste, lo que le llamamos la Corte Vieja, ¿no? La Corte Vieja es un edificio hermoso que todos lo conocemos, es icónico aquí para Nogales, y la oficina de South32 está aquí. Yo los invito para que vengan a ver, pero volviendo a lo mismo, de que si alguien quiere identificar algún área donde se pueda mejorar la comunidad, algún grupo, vengan por favor a visitarme. Yo estoy en el 3er piso, y eso quería, que no se me fallara decirlo, ¿no? Para que vengan a visitarme.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Y trabajando, como dijo el señor Risner, trabajando específicamente con el condado en su visión del crecimiento de la comunidad, ¿no? De jobs, de trabajo, de todo el economic growth del condado, que están trabajando específicamente con el condado, ¿no?
Así es, definitivamente. Y estás mencionando, y ahora sí ya no me voy a adelantar, estamos hablando de todas esas otras organizaciones como Cero Estrés, precisamente, y muchas organizaciones sin lucro, ¿verdad? Con las que se puede colaborar. Se ha colaborado por los últimos 4 años y el plan es de continuar ayudando para que esta comunidad sea exitosa y tenga mucho crecimiento.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so getting into the next area that I want to discuss is Fast 41. So that's something, a phrase or a word that's been going around that people have been saying or hearing about the Hermosa Project. And well, real quick, before we get into the significance of of Fast 41, the Hermosa Project. What is Fast 41?
Right. So Fast 41 is legislation or a program that went into effect in 2015 during the Obama administration. It's an acronym, so it's not meant, FAST is not meant to be quick, it's not to refer to pace. It stands for Fixing America's Surface Transportation.
Okay.
And so the program originally was conceived or put into place to support the expedient permitting and construction of shovel-ready infrastructure projects, mostly transportation projects, back at that point in time. There's now 18 covered sectors that are eligible for Fast 41.
So it's expanded quite a bit.
Yeah, and mining is one of those, but until May of this year, there'd never been a mining project in Fast 41. Really, the way it works, the NEPA process, what we call the NEPA process, which is the federal permitting process in the U.S., is really a very significant coordination exercise between many different federal agencies. Native American tribes, communities are all involved. So what Fast 41 does is it provides enhanced coordination, resourcing, predictability, and transparency that you don't typically get in a normal federal permitting process. And so that's the value we saw in it. We initially will develop the project from private lands where we don't require federal permitting, but for full development of both resources, we will.
Okay.
And so that's what it is, and those are the advantages that we see and why we pursued that.
Okay. Sandra, entonces si puede explicar a la comunidad qué es Fast 41.
Claro que sí, mira, muchos de nosotros estamos familiarizados con ese nombre, ¿no? Porque se ha implementado aquí en la frontera con todo el tráfico que tenemos de industria y de produce. Este permiso es un permiso que no nomás regula la transportación, se ha expandido a muchos otros sectores y la minería es uno de ellos. Como se dice, FAST no quiere decir que va a ser un proceso más rápido, solo ayuda a las personas que han aplicado, en este caso South32, que tengo entendido que es la primera mina que es aceptada en este programa, a que tenga un proceso más transparente y sobre todo que se pueda seguir paso a paso, no nomás las compañías, sino también, por ejemplo, los ciudadanos en general. Si ellos quieren saber, ¿cuándo va a operar la mina? ¿Cuándo va a abrir? Hay un lugar en internet donde ellos pueden entrar y van siguiendo lo que es el proceso. ¿Cómo le ayuda este proceso a la mina? Pues ayuda no a acortar ese tiempo, sino a ser diligente en todos los requisitos, porque sí es un proceso que tiene muchos factores, por ejemplo, del medio ambiente, del cuidado del agua, todos esos tienen que cumplir con las reglas y reglamentos. Entonces, no es que va a ser más fácil, pero nos ayuda en el aspecto de que vamos a estar a tiempo cuando se tenga que estar para que ese proceso sea, y si dicen 2 años, 3 años, lo que sea, se va a operar ahí.
Okay,
Eso es esencialmente, en pocas palabras. Es más complejo, pero...
So Sandra just mentioned that this is the first mining project ever, Hermosa Project, the first mining project ever to be accepted in the Fast 41 program. And that feels significant.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reasons for that, having gone through the process, we believe is the strategic importance of the resource for the country. So I opened talking about 2 critical minerals as its primary production, how critical both of those are to putting 8 to 9 million new electric vehicles a year on the road and increasing our renewable energy. So for our nation to achieve its targets and not be reliant on foreign supply chains, it has strategic importance to the country. The other 2 reasons why I think we were the first project is, one, how we're proposing to do it, the sustainability aspects of the project, things that are unique that others aren't doing. So,
of course,
small footprint mine, 600 acres of total disturbance. A typical mining project's 5,000 to 10,000 acres of disturbance.
Wow. Okay.
Low carbon design principles, renewable energy, battery electric equipment,
of course,
to achieve a net zero emissions outcome, and dry stack tailings, which is a new. We've built the first new tailing storage facility that's a dry stack in the U.S., and so it reduces water intensity and a number of other things.
Of course.
The third reason, I think, so strategic importance of the resource, how we're proposing to do it, But I also think the potential socioeconomic uplift for the community was another factor in it.
Okay.
The significance of what it does for the economy of Santa Cruz County, the impact of those jobs, and the potential uplift. I think those are the three reasons I would cite as to why it was selected as the first project.
Great. Now I got to admit that there's a lot of words and phrases there that I just did not understand.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine there's a place where people can go to learn more about what this process means. Sandra, you mentioned there's a website where people can go to follow the steps, but also to learn what all those things mean, to understand the sustainability of this project. I mean, I wanted to get into the sustainability a little bit, but we mentioned it, so let's address it now. We'll get into it a little bit more, of course, but so people can understand what this means and how it affects the community.
Okay.
Is there somewhere where people can go? Or?
Yeah, so we have the website, South32Hermosa.com.
Okay.
We have materials on there that would speak to all of these things. Both there's the economic impact study on the website that talks about the numbers we use to show what it'll do for the community, the jobs, the tax revenue, puts it into context of the importance of that. It talks about all the sustainability elements that I talked about, and there's quite a bit on there on what zinc, manganese, and all the resources are used for as well.
Of course.
The other thing I would encourage people to do is in the fall we will restart our public tours. So we do public tours of the site on the first Friday, I believe, of every month, and you can anyone can come, you can sign up, and there's nothing that puts it in a context and helps explain it and helps people understand, particularly some of the sustainability things. I talked about a small footprint mine,
Yes.
not disturbing very much area.
Yeah.
Well, when you go out and see it, it actually brings that to life, and you
It's
can
not like a
appreciate
giant
that.
open pit.
Right. So the other thing I would encourage people to do is take advantage of the public tours.
Okay. Now, one thing that I just lost my train of thought for a second. No, transparency. That's what I mean. So we're going to talk about the money. So let this be the transition.
¿Te olvidas de mí?
No, I'm sorry, Sandra. Es cierto, Sandra. Se me olvidó porque ya mencionaste Fast 41, pero no entramos a lo técnico, ¿no? Entonces sí.
Sí, nomás en unas cositas me gustaría tocar, porque creo que no he mencionado en lo que viene siendo la traducción la importancia de los dos minerales que el gobierno nacional ha declarado como críticos, ¿no?
Sí.
Que viene siendo pues el manganeso y el zinc. Y cómo por lo menos creemos que por tres diferentes razones fue este permiso aceptado en este programa. Y uno de ellos es pues que se demostró que la manera que esto se va a beneficiar nacionalmente. Tiene que ser un beneficio de esa magnitud para que se pueda considerar, ¿no?
Y sin depender en otros países.
Sí, exacto, sin depender de, por ejemplo, pues uno de ellos ahorita que viene de China. Entonces, la segunda razón que quería mencionar, yo creo que es muy importante, es cómo va a ser la operación, cómo se está trabajando para, por ejemplo, dejar una huella más chica, lo que viene siendo en la mina, ¿no? Ahora que entremos ahora en otoño, se van a estar haciendo unos tours, y los vamos a estar haciendo en español también. Las personas que estén interesadas, los invitamos cada primer viernes del mes, se va a hacer esos tours y pueden ir a la mina a ver cómo está, cómo son las operaciones. De verdad, la vez que yo lo hice está impactante, porque yo me imaginaba una cosa que no lo es. El diseño es mínimo en cuestión geográfico, y esa es otra de las razones, como decimos, pensamos, ¿por qué? Porque esa huella es mínima. El proceso de cuando se extrae el oro y se vuelve a alimentar a la tierra, tantos procesos, y sí, como dijiste, son muchos términos técnicos, pero esa es otra razón por la que pensamos que se aceptó. La tercera razón, y muy, muy importante, que es una que me apasiona a mí, que es la comunidad. ¿Cómo se iba a beneficiar la comunidad, en este caso Santa Cruz, de las operaciones de la mina? Entonces, por esas tres razones, creemos que se aceptó la aplicación para el FAST.
Y también
41.
el señor Risner mencionó que van a abrir tours.
Así es, ajá.
Sí, en el otoño, ¿no?
Sí, creemos que van a empezar en septiembre, perdón. Septiembre, ya estamos
ok.
en agosto.
Sí,
En
ya,
septiembre.
ya llegó la mesa.
Sí, sí, sí. Y voy a tener el gusto de estar haciendo algunos de ellos, así que de nuevo es una invitación para las personas que estén interesadas. El cupo sí está limitado, pero van a ser cada primer viernes de cada mes. Entonces hay bastante cupo y oportunidad para que aquellos que estén interesados, está la invitación abierta.
Ok, y página de website para, pues como ya dijimos, ¿no? De las palabras técnicas que ni sé yo, ¿no? Pero para esa información, para que para que explica, ¿no? A la comunidad lo que es, lo que significa la comunidad. Hay una página de website, ¿no?
Sí, en la página de South32 ahí se pueden encontrar los documentos, por ejemplo, una hoja que te da toda la información del manganeso, ¿no? Cómo estamos planeando la infraestructura que se está creando para operaciones. Cualquier cosa. Y si no está ahí, por favor, con toda confianza, contáctenos. Hay expertos que pueden contestar cualquier pregunta que tengan. No voy a ser yo, porque son cosas bien técnicas, pero hay profesionales, gente que esos son sus estudios y con gusto podemos coordinar algo para que contesten todas sus preguntas.
Ok, muy bien. Y la página es south32hermosa.com, ¿verdad?
Aquí ay, no la traje, no me la sé de memoria, pero ¿qué te parece si la ponemos?
Sí, la podemos poner, ¿no?
Sí.
But just real quick, it's South32 Project. It's South32hermosa.com.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, and we'll make sure that we have a graphic for that.
Sí, por favor.
So transferring into this, into the actual mining operations itself. Transparency is very important to any community, of course. You recently sent a letter to the Tucson Sentinel and the Nogales International that really kind of laid things out as far as how it goes. But let's get a little bit more into the actual mining operations. When is that set to begin?
Right. So we have started some construction on the private land. So we're surrounded by the Coronado National Forest, but we have a block of private land where the two deposits are centered.
Okay.
And so we've commenced construction on some of the early developments. So we're sinking 2 vertical shafts so that we can get access underground to the zinc ore body. That's started. We've built a water treatment plant. Later this year, we will commence construction. So the 2 shafts are to access the zinc resource.
Okay.
Later this year, we'll commence construction of what we call a decline, which is really just an angled tunnel that starts in the side of the mountain and goes down in underground to get to the manganese resource.
So anybody who's ever visited an old mine, something like that, has probably experienced something like that. Like I've been to Bisbee, and I imagine it's something similar to those.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
In one case, the shafts are vertical, and the decline's kind of angled into the mountain, which is probably what you would have experienced in Bisbee or other places like that.
Yeah.
So we'll commence construction on that later this year. The first production from the zinc resource would come in early 2027. So we have a multi-year construction program. Early next calendar year, we'll start building a small-scale demonstration plant for the manganese resource. And at the end of 2025, be in a position where we would be underground to be able to take a bulk sample of the manganese resource and be producing small volumes from that demonstration plant at the end of 2025, mainly to support ongoing negotiations with potential customers.
Of course. So I guess the next question would be in relation to that is, when can the economic benefits start being seen of that in this community?
Yeah, well, so as soon as we start constructing and building facilities on site, obviously the tax sort of base starts to grow, so the tax benefits start to flow. Significant ramp up in employment through construction, and so you will start to see employment opportunities grow exponentially from probably the end of this calendar year as the construction efforts ramp up. Subject to a final decision later this year by our board, but at that point, early next calendar year, you should see the employment really start to ramp up rapidly, and then as we start to build facilities on the site, then the tax benefits start to flow as well.
Okay.
The real significant economic benefits start to flow as soon as we hit first production.
Great, awesome. Ahora en español, Sandra, ¿no?
Sí, claro que sí.
Pues primero, ¿no? Pues ¿cuándo planean empezar y qué es el proceso?
El proceso ya de construcción ya comenzó. Está rodeado en el National Forest, ¿no? La operación ya comenzó. Ya se hizo las perforaciones para el oro que viene siendo del zinc y se está haciendo un túnel que está un poco ladeado. Comentaste que ya tenías un poco de experiencia de eso, ¿no? Cómo se ve ladeado. Yo no he visto en sí el túnel, pero se está haciendo para el oro del manganeso.
Okay.
En cuanto al beneficio económico, eso se va a empezar a ver cuando ya se empiece a vender el producto y operaciones se prevé que empiece ya al año 2027, a principios del 2027 más o menos.
Okay.
Pero pues también eso depende ya en las ventas y en lo que viene siendo los impuestos que vienen regresando ya al condado, ¿verdad?
Okay.
Ahí se empieza a ver.
Empieza cuando empieza la construcción o cuando empieza a crecer la construcción.
Así
¿no?
es, como comentó el señor Risner, que eso pueden ustedes esperar que ya se empiece a contratar gente para más construcción, ¿no? A medida de que va creciendo el proyecto.
Okay, muy bien. So the next one is, I mean, you mentioned that it's not a renewable resource. This is a resource. Both of these resources are resources that will run out, which is what happens with mines. You know, it's a real reality. But how long do you project for this mine to be here?
Yeah, so maybe the first thing to note is both resources are still growing. Okay. So we have an understanding of how long they might last right now.
Yeah.
But we're continuing to drill exploration holes around the edges, and we continue to find more zinc and more manganese. So we expect in the future the life of the mine to extend further than what we think it is right now, because we expect them to continue to grow. But what we've said, based on what we know now, the manganese would produce for 60 years, the zinc for a little between 20 and 25 years. Okay. But again, we do expect the zinc resource to grow. Yeah. So these are multi-decade, multi-generational type deposits. It's not forever, but they are long life, and part of why we take the approach we do with communities, transparency, and shared value is we expect to be a citizen of the community for a very long time. Okay. And so it's important that that shared value and the relationships and the transparency are critical, because we want to be in a position where we can provide those benefits for decades. And I've been involved in mining operations in my career where we had 3 generations of families in the workforce all at once. Wow. And so these projects, when we talk about for generations, they absolutely can have that kind of positive impact.
So speaking of generational mining, this is a fact that I think that most people of Santa Cruz County don't know about me, is that my generation, me and my brothers, were the first generation, I think 3 or 4 generations, that's not in mining. And it was from Bisbee where my mining family's from. That's just a side note, unimportant. But Sandra, la pregunta es, ¿qué tanta va a durar esta mina? No, pues esos resources no son, pues no duran, no van a ser por siempre.
Así es, no van a durar por siempre ninguno de los dos, pero como se había proyectado inicialmente, la vida del manganeso era como de 60 años, entonces estamos hablando de varias generaciones, ¿no? que pudieran beneficiarse de esto. Y el del zinc ahorita todavía se está descubriendo más potencial, entonces ese estaba proyectado como una vida de 20-25 años, pero a como se está descubriendo más, puede ser que sea un poco más. Entonces esa vida, por eso la compañía está tan comprometida con la comunidad en tener valores en común, estar completamente entregado a superar todas las áreas de la comunidad, porque pues esperamos estar aquí por muchas generaciones, por muchos años, ¿verdad? Sí. Donde ha habido generaciones que han estado hasta tres generaciones en algunas de las minas, de experiencia que ha tenido el señor Pat Risner. Entonces eso es lo que se espera aquí. Mucho futuro, mucho futuro.
Okay, muy bien. So, Pat, you'd mentioned, well, two things that I want to touch on is one thing I want to expand on something that you'd mentioned. You'd mentioned the growth of the mine, drilling holes, exploration holes to find out what is the planned expansion. I mean, is there a limit? Is there somewhere where that stops?
We don't know yet, and
Okay.
that's part of what we know. It's continuing to grow. In certain areas, we haven't found the full extent of it, and
course.
we'll continue to explore. Obviously, there's limits if we don't hold the claims to the resource at some point.
Yeah.
But we have about 45,000 acres of mining claims around the two
Okay.
known resources, and so throughout the life of the mine, we'll continue to explore, and at some point, we will find the full extent of it.
All right.
But don't know where that is.
I think that's a really good spot to talk about the sustainability part of this. I mean, I know we're gonna get into some of the concerns that people in the community have, but
Right.
but I feel like that's a really good spot to discuss the sustainability, the small footprint, the was it next generation mine?
Yeah.
What that means.
Okay. So, I mean, if you think about the concerns, we typically have environmental concerns around a mining operation. One is, vast areas of land being disturbed, so impact on biological resources, plants, animals, things like that, and cultural resources potentially if you have significant land disturbance. So that's why keeping that land disturbance to an absolute minimum is important. So we, as I said earlier, we can mine both deposits for a total surface disturbance of only about 600 acres.
Okay.
To put that into context, a lot of the open pit copper projects you see around here are mines, they're 5,000 to 10,000 acres. It's about a 95% reduction in the amount of land on the surface
That's
that we
incredible.
disturb. So that keeps that impact to a minimum.
And that holds true even with the growth as you guys expand.
Yeah.
Okay.
And most of the land we're disturbing was previously disturbed from mining in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Of course, there's
So
lots of mining out in that
a lot of
area.
historic mining in the mountains, so it's not new disturbance. The new disturbance is minimal, and it's been important for us to design the mine in a way that, when we say small footprint, that's what we mean. Minimize how much surface disturbance you get.
Okay.
It's the advantage of how we will mine it underground and how we will manage the tailings that come out of the processing and all of that.
Okay, great.
The second important piece is emissions, air. Our company has a goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions from all its operations by 2050. So we have, in designing the mine at Hermosa, have a pathway to get to where we have net zero greenhouse gas emissions from the mine. We'll achieve that by using all renewable power, battery electric fleets underground, equipment fleets, as well as on the surface. That's not been done before in the industry, so another unique one.
Well, real quick before we expand on that, I would like, one, I wanted to jump to Sandra real quick. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I feel like we've covered a lot of information, and it's important for us to cover that in Spanish before we go further. And then I also would like to get into explaining what net zero actually means.
Right.
Okay, Sandra, principio, para empezar, ¿no? El crecimiento de la mina, ¿no? Siguen encontrando depósitos del manganeso y el zinc, ¿verdad? Ese es
Correcto.
otro. Y hay potencial que se expanda la mina, pero como dice el señor Risner, como dijo, sigue con el mismo footprint, ¿verdad? Que chico, un footprint small, ¿no? Small footprint.
Sí, la huella pequeña. Ahorita es un área más o menos como de 600 acres y todas las exploraciones que se han hecho se han contenido en ese radio, ¿verdad? También se ha tratado de mantener así en las exploraciones que han hecho otras minas en el pasado, pero hasta ahorita todo lo que se ha encontrado ha sido contenido en esos 600 acres, y es el plan de seguir explorando entre eso. Entonces, donde están los ores ahorita es un poco más reducido, pero se continuará explorando adentro de esa circunferencia.
Okay. Y, pues la pregunta como pregunta el señor Risner, que me imagino que muchos de la comunidad van a tener es, ¿cómo se ve ese crecimiento y cómo va a afectar? Y pues el señor Risner dijo que como dijo, no, va a seguir con un small impact. Pero ¿cómo es posible, no? Con el crecimiento.
Muy bien, pues uno de los planes es de usar energía renovable, que eso pues te elimina mucha de los métodos actuales, ¿no? Entonces, el segundo punto muy importante, creo yo, es que se piense usar flotas de vehículos eléctricos. Con eso se elimina lo que viene siendo la contaminación, ¿no? Y con eso se puede lograr también las metas que tiene Estados Unidos y Arizona de cero emisiones.
Para el 2050, ¿no?
Correcto.
Okay. So net zero or cero emisiones, my understanding of that is that it's to make the as few emissions as possible, and whatever emissions are unable to be contained will be countered through other sustainable practices, correct? Or
Yeah, I mean, our approach is obviously our approach is to decarbonize the operation so we don't use offsets or other actions to offset. So for us, practically what it means is how do you eliminate the burning of diesel fuel or gasoline?
of course.
Not using power sources that come from fossil fuels and emit greenhouse gases. So practically, if I distilled it down, for us it really just means how do we eliminate the production of greenhouse gases from our operational processes, which the vast majority of that's burning diesel, gasoline, and using electricity.
Okay.
And so that in simplistic terms for us, that's what it means. And the reason for that, our company has this broader goal, but these are resources that are being produced to support our efforts to address climate change. So they need to not contribute further to climate change.
Of
And that's
course.
why that's important.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is great. So Sandra, cero emisiones, lo que yo tengo entendido significa es que es tratar de no tener nada de emisiones, cero emisiones. Pero si es imposible lograr que hagan, como dijo el señor Risner, offsets. Pero el plan es de tener cero emisiones completamente, ¿verdad?
Correcto. Entonces, para poder lograr eso, ¿qué es lo que se está planeando? No utilizar la energía de fósiles, ¿no? El diésel, la gasolina, todo eso. ¿Y cómo se puede lograr? Implementando todo lo que signifique que no tenga, y hasta lo apunté porque el término es, creo que me gustaría que nos familiarizáramos con él porque va a ser de ahora en adelante algo muy, muy común.
Okay.
Es emisión de gases efecto invernadero, lo que quiere decir que queremos eliminar todo lo que venga de ese tipo de energía y usando pues cosas alternas.
Okay, muy bien. So as far as, I'm so sorry, my notes just got closed. My last question when it comes to the actual mining goes back to the fact that these are not renewable resources. So though it may be decades out, there is a shelf life. Is there an exit strategy? Is there a restoration plan that South32 has for the community? And like you mentioned, sustainable growth, where even after you guys are gone, that growth remains.
Right.
So what is the plan there?
So maybe to speak to the on-the-ground piece first.
course.
Even though we might be talking about an operation that's here for 60 years, let's just say in the case of the manganese, we, in studying and designing projects, we plan for and design closure at the start as part of designing the mine. So we have developed a closure plan for the current mine design and mine life, for what will it look like at the end of mine life, and how do we rehabilitate and appropriately close the site. So as an example, the tailings storage facility on the site, which is where we will store portions of the tailings that come from the processing piece. Historically in a lot of mines, they require water treatment plants to run to service those facilities long term. In part of our design of closure of this operation, we have designed a cover to basically cover that, put growth material like soil, topsoil back, and reseed it with native vegetation so that water can't get to it, so you actually don't have to do long-term water treatment.
Okay.
So it's another thing that's unique about what we're doing. But we think about those things and we put designs in place for those things now at the front end so that we know before we even start how we would close and rehabilitate the site. On the piece you talked about in terms of sustainable benefits, that really goes down to, how are the tax revenues and our social investments used over that multi-decade period. And, we want to make sure that a lot of that is directed collaboratively with the community and local government, that's directed to some things that can be sustained and live on beyond, our life and time in the community.
Okay. Sandra, la pregunta es, en este caso, ¿qué planes tiene South32 para restaurar el área donde están estorbando? Y después, ¿qué es el plan del long term? Pues no puedo pensar en la palabra, ¿no? Pero long term economic growth para que es sostenible, ¿no? Yo creo que es la palabra. No sé, se me fue
sostenible.
la mente. Sostenible. Perdón, ¿no?
Cuidado.
¿Qué es el plan entonces en este caso?
Mira, ya existen planes a futuro. Por ejemplo, si aquí, este es el comienzo, ¿dónde va a terminar? ¿Qué se va a hacer cuando ya se termine de trabajar el área que se ha minado, ¿verdad? Entonces, por ejemplo, hay un plan donde el tratamiento del agua, ¿qué se va a hacer con ese tratamiento de agua? ¿Cómo se va a utilizar ahorita y en un futuro? Pero sobre todo lo que vienen siendo los relaves, ¿qué se va a hacer con lo poco que quede sobre la superficie? ¿Cómo se va a cubrir de otra tierra para que sea sostenible y pueda en un futuro poder lograrse lo que está ahorita? Crecimiento de plantas, nuestros animales, nuestras plantas, nuestros árboles, todo eso. Entonces, pero ahorita ya hay una visión. Vamos a empezar aquí, ¿qué va a pasar en el futuro?
Esa es la pregunta, ¿no? Ok, muy bien, muchísimas gracias. So, that wraps up most of my specific questions about the mining operations in Patagonia. Now we're going to address the concerns. I mean, it's not a secret. These are concerns that have been very public, but and specifically about Rio Rico. All right, so let's talk about that first, because there was a proposal for rezoning in Rio Rico presented by local rancher Andy Jackson. Now, there was some confusion as to what that meant regarding any vagueness or lack of specificity when it came to the proposal. And there was speculation that South32 was involved. Do you want to really clear the air on that?
Sure.
Starting out.
Yeah, so, I mean, we were aware of the proposal. I think, and we were also aware that there was a reference to mining. I think when projects like this come into a community, there's all kinds of businesses that tend to pop up and things to serve our needs, and some of that kind of growth actually occurs. So it's natural to think that people might be thinking in those terms. But we were never involved in conceiving this rezoning proposal. We were very clear we didn't need it. And we were indifferent as to what that landowner and others decided to do with their property. We have been in the process of siting 2 off-site facilities, but we were still very much in these need to be in Santa Cruz County, again, to maximize economic benefit, but had not zeroed in on any particular location, didn't have a preferred location. So certainly we didn't require this rezoning proposal, and we weren't part of conceiving it. I mean, to give you, to put that into context, the main facility we're looking to site first is this remote operating center.
So I want to stop you just really quick, because I want to address in Spanish real quick before we talk about the facility. I'm sorry. I want to address in Spanish what we just discussed. Sandra, refiero a ti, ¿no? Me imagino que
sí, claro, sé perfectamente. Recuerdo la pregunta. Claro, la mina sí tenía conocimiento de los planes de esa rezonificación que estaba planeando el señor Andy Jackson. Sin embargo, no tenía ninguna involucración en ese proceso, ¿no? Como todo, cuando hay un tipo de proyecto así tan grande, salen muchas posibilidades. Sí se sabía que la palabra mina estaba ahí, pero no estaba de ninguna manera relacionada con South32. No está relacionado South32 con ese proyecto. Inclusive, sí hay la posibilidad de que se esté buscando ahorita por lo menos dos lugares para instalaciones, y ahorita el señor Risner va a hablar de eso. pero nomás queremos reiterar eso, ¿no? Que no fuimos parte de ese proceso, así que sí sabíamos, estábamos conscientes de él, pero no fuimos parte de él.
Okay. So now going back to the facility that you don't have a location, that you didn't have a location planned,
Yeah.
but you do have a facility, an off-site facility planned, which I think also plays into the health concerns question that I was going to have. Do you want to get into
Well, I mean, the reason I wanted to talk about the remote operating center is because to put into context as to demonstrate why this rezoning proposal couldn't have been something we were pushing or asking for.
Yeah.
We're looking for a 5-acre parcel
Okay.
for a command center.
All right.
I believe the rezoning proposal was more than 3,500 acres.
Yes, it was a very large proposal.
So it doesn't make any sense that we would be asking or involved with a 3,500 plus acre rezoning proposal when we're looking for a 5-acre block of land to site what is essentially an office building to be a command center for us to remotely operate our mine with some extremely high-tech jobs and opportunities. I mean, nearly 40% of our workforce will report there. So I just wanted to, that's the primary facility we were looking to locate.
Okay.
Rio Rico was one of 7 different locations we're looking at. But I think that's probably the best demonstration as to why we certainly were not driving the proposal.
Okay.
We need a fraction of that amount of land for the one facility that we were more actively looking to site in Santa Cruz County.
Okay, Sandra.
Sí, mira, una de las instalaciones que se está planeando hacer es para operaciones remotas, ¿no? Integradas. Estas operaciones, imagínense un edificio así como tipo NASA, donde tienen muchos paneles, alta tecnología, 100%, pero no se requiere más de 5 acres para esa instalación, comparado a lo que era el proyecto de casi 35,000 acres, ¿no?
Sí, algo
entonces
así.
nos
Muy
podemos
grande.
dar una idea ahí de que no se iba a estar empujando por algo así cuando en realidad solo 5 acres se requería para esas instalaciones.
Okay. So that leads me to another question that I had, which was about the processing.
Right.
Now, there's some questions about there being a possibility of a facility where this stuff will be processed, or
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the other one that I'm not sure how it made its way into this discussion, but it did. So we will mine the manganese at the mine site, but
Okay.
we are looking to site a manganese production facility that would take the mined manganese ore and convert it into small batch battery grade manganese for sale directly to an electric vehicle
Okay.
producer. So that facility needs to be sited somewhere. The siting of that facility was much further behind even the remote operating center in our selection process. All we really had said about that facility is we also believe the feedback we've had from local leadership in the county was that let's maximize the economic benefits to the county. So we wanted to site it in the county.
okay.
We certainly had never zeroed in on Rio Rico as a site for that facility. We just said in Santa Cruz County. And so we are continuing to look at various locations in Santa Cruz County, but it's much earlier days in terms of siting it. And what we've said about that facility is we have many criteria around these things, but one of them is not near residential areas, not near schools. We have to collect baseline information around air quality, waterway, surface water courses, all of those sorts of things. Okay. So we're still in that process of collecting that information and looking at many sites. Okay. I also said if there's nowhere in Santa Cruz County where the community wants to site that facility, and then we can look elsewhere and cite it elsewhere because community sentiment is also one of our criteria.
Okay.
But we never had zeroed in on Rio Rico for that
Or
facility
anywhere for that
or
matter.
anywhere, and I think that's the sort of misunderstanding that made its way into the discussions on this issue.
Okay, Sandra.
Mira, uno de las otras instalaciones que viene siendo donde se va a procesar el manganeso que sea de calidad para batería, ¿no? Entonces, este sí requiere un poco más de espacio, pero en el proceso de crear estos planes estaba mucho más atrasado de lo que viene siendo el IROC, que es el otro centro de operaciones remotas integradas. Entonces, no se sabe exactamente cómo se integró eso a lo que viene siendo el plan y todo lo que sucedió, pero definitivamente se ha estado buscando, para el IRAC había como 7 posibilidades en Santa Cruz. Algunos líderes de la comunidad sí mostraron el interés de que lo que venía haciendo para procesar las utilidades del manganeso, que sea un producto bueno para crear baterías, que fuera también en el condado de Santa Cruz. Pero nunca se dijo, bueno, va a estar en Río Rico. Inclusive todavía está en proceso eso, ¿no? Y se están viendo otras localidades para poder hacer eso. Entonces, el sentimiento de la comunidad en algo así, que se respeta y se reconoce que es una de las principales preocupaciones de la comunidad, se toma mucho en cuenta para una decisión así. Entonces, queremos asegurar que el sentimiento es una de las cosas que se va a tomar en cuenta y pues que no era el plan de decir o ya estaba determinado que iba a ir a Río Rico.
Okay, so the last concern that I want to address is health concerns. Manganese is objectively a dangerous material. It is vital, but it is also dangerous. There are lots of precautions that need to be taken, from what I understand, to ensure that, like you'd mentioned, you're checking on baseline for clean air, water, and such. But the transport of that is critical. What is the plan? And while you're at it, why not you address the rumor that's been going around about a rail line being added for the purpose of transportation?
Yeah. So manganese, there are some issues with manganese in very high concentrations, very high volumes.
Thank you for specifying.
There's manganese in the soil. You need manganese in your diet. So as with everything, it depends on the quantity and exposure. But we take these things very seriously. We've talked about we expect to set a new standard for sustainable mining with the way in which we're designing Hermosa. That also includes safety. It includes safety of the people that work for us and the safety of the community in which we operate. So the opportunity we have that a lot of other manganese operations out in the world today don't have is, as a new operation, we can implement new technology and apply controls and ways of doing things that others can't from the start. And so we're doing that. The manganese deposit is still in a pre-feasibility study where we still are looking at all the different ways we might do things. And as part of that, looking at all the ways in which we could conduct the transport in a way that obviously minimizes or eliminates that risk of exposure. And so what we will do is we'll conduct baseline surveys on dust levels in the community along transportation routes. We will continuously monitor those while we do the transport. We will have plans in place for how we take actions if we see any changes on that. We've committed, we're looking at technology for how we haul the ore in sealed containers, so sealed transport, sealed contained offload at the processing facility so that there's not exposure to the environment. So between the controls of how we'll transport it and implementing new technology, having that baseline of what dust levels and the air quality is like before we ever start, and then continuously monitoring as we do it, we will know if there are any issues and we're able to take action. But our approach to designing these hazards out as part of being a next generation mine will apply technology to manage those in an appropriate way, in a way in which others might not be managing them today. So that's the advantage we have. The other thing is we'll be transparent about that. That baseline and that monitoring, community health baseline surveys, all of those things, we're transparent with data. We do that now. We have a track record of that. Okay. All the water monitoring data, seeps and springs monitoring we do gets posted to the website. And so we have a track record of being transparent with data like that now, and we would do the same in this instance too.
Okay. Now the supposed rail line?
Yes. So we don't have any plans to build a rail line into Hermosa.
Okay.
All of our plans are based on trucking anything that comes off site, trucking it either to a customer directly, to a processing facility or whatever it might be, a facility to produce the battery grade manganese, or potentially to a rail facility in Tucson to put it on rail. Okay. We don't plan to build any new rail line as part of this project.
Okay, great. Sandra?
Voy a empezar con lo que tiene que ver con la salud, ¿no? Se comenta que el manganeso se encuentra en la tierra, nuestro cuerpo requiere el manganeso,
Pues,
entonces...
un ejemplo que quiero dar de eso específicamente, no si ves a tu cereal, no tus Cheerios o algo, ahí dice zinc, dice, hay unos que hasta dicen manganeso o algo, ¿no? Un porcentaje que tiene. Entonces, es en la comida, ¿no?
Sí,
Está en la comida.
muy bien. Como dijimos, el manganeso en porciones altas es cuando es tóxico, puede ser dañino a la salud, ¿no? Pero la compañía South32 va a establecer bases de salud por medio de estudios.
Esos los bases empiezan como está la comunidad ahorita.
Ajá, ahorita. Entonces, bueno, el estudio no va a empezar hoy, pero cuando se esté listo para empezar, esa va a ser la base de salud.
Al momento que empieza el estudio, ese es el base.
Correcto. Entonces, a medida de que vaya, progrese operaciones, se continuará monitoreando la salud de la comunidad, ¿no?
Okay.
Eso se establece, es una de las cosas que es un hecho que se va a hacer. Habrías hablado también lo que viene siendo de una... railroad, no, discúlpame. Sí, del tren, ¿no? O sea, vías de tren para poder extraer transportar lo que viene siendo los minerales. Eso no está en los planes de la compañía South32. Okay. Se planea transportar todo por medio de los troques que van a estar sellados. Eso es uno de los temas que se ha hablado. Estamos tratando de agarrar un prototipo para que se vea cómo van a ser esos camiones, pero el plan es que sea todo por medio de tierra, ya sea a donde se va a procesar o directamente a algún comprador, pero no transportarlo por medio de vías.
Y una cosa que el señor Risner, que mencionó él, que no ha mencionado usted, es quiere poner estándares nuevos, ¿no? South32 quiere estar arriba de todos en este caso.
Definitivamente, ¿no? Quiere poner un estándar de minería de nueva generación. ¿Qué implica eso? Eso implica implementar todos los procesos nuevos, como ya comentamos, ¿no? Cero emisiones, cómo se trata el agua, el compromiso con la comunidad, todo eso que sea verdadero y durable, que dure a futuro. Y sobre todo, pues, con toda la tecnología que tiene la habilidad de implementar, hacer la diferencia en la comunidad, cuidándonos la salud, cuidándonos el porvenir del progreso de la comunidad, los beneficios que vienen con las ventas de impuestos, obviamente, y todo lo que viene con eso, definitivamente.
Okay. Muchísimas gracias. So before we wrap up, the last thing that I want to talk about is, well, what's on that flyer right there. We've got an open house. We're talking about transparency, of course, which has been kind of a theme that we've carried over in this interview. Is you guys are going to be holding an open house on the 17th of August, correct?
Right. So we've been conducting open houses for a few years now, but I think one of the things, as the issues in Rio Rico came up, one of the things I committed to publicly in the Board of Supervisors meetings is open and transparent communication and engagement is important to us. And so we committed, even though we were very clear we've had nothing to do with this rezoning proposal, that we would conduct a public meeting in Rio Rico to talk more about what we are doing and share information with people, provide a setting where there can be informal dialogue, to ask any questions and share as much information as we can. And so we're going to be holding that meeting on Thursday, August 17th from 5 to 7 p.m. At Rio Rico High School. I'll be there. Many of our staff members that have expertise in various areas will be there. We'll have some information set up so people can ask any questions that they want. And I guess when I mentioned that, the reason these kinds of things are important, as I said, community sentiment is a criteria. But also, we need to hear from the community, and we need the community to have enough information to understand what we're doing. So these sessions are very important, and so would encourage anybody interested to please come and spend some time with us, learning about what we're doing, and the opportunity to ask any questions they might have.
All right, and that's at Rio Rico High School, Thursday, August 17th, at what time?
5 to 7 p.m.
5 to 7 p.m. That's awesome. Sandra, si quiere explicar, invitar a la gente de la comunidad.
Claro que sí. Uno de los valores de la compañía South32 viene siendo la transparencia Y ese es uno de los propósitos que se está haciendo esta invitación para que vayan al Open House, que va a ser el día jueves 17 de agosto en el gimnasio de la preparatoria de Rio Rico High School. Ahí van a estar los expertos para hablar en las diferentes áreas y poder contestar preguntas técnicas con detalle de los procesos de la mina. Entonces, todos aquellos interesados, y obviamente si usted tiene cualquier pregunta o mortificación, que cómo usted se puede beneficiar o afectar con este proyecto, por favor, los invitamos a que nos acompañen. El señor Pat Risner ahí va a estar. Vamos a ver gente que hablamos el español para poder ayudar. Y de nuevo, ese es parte del compromiso para poder aclarar dudas y poder unirnos más. Obviamente, como comentamos, el sentimiento de la comunidad es muy importante para cómo hacemos negocio, cómo operamos, y pues ahí los esperamos.
Okay, muy bien, muchísimas gracias. Thank you both so much for sitting down with me and having this conversation, and for addressing the community in this time of uncertainty that many of us seem to find ourselves in. Is there anything else that you would like to address the community on before we wrap it up?
I wish thank you for your time. I think the reason we went to the Board of Supervisors meeting a couple weeks ago is when these things come up, our approach is get right out there and share information, provide information. So we really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and that you allowed us to come on and share our story and share some more information to hopefully address some of the concerns that the community has had. And that's always how we will operate. And so we're looking forward to further discussions on the 17th. But thank you for having us.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate it, Sandra.
Gracias. Sobre todo agradeciendo a la comunidad por la oportunidad de escucharnos, de permitirnos compartir lo que estamos haciendo. En este Open House, de verdad, ahí va a estar de muchas maneras explicado los diferentes etapas, proyectos que hay a futuro. Entonces, acompáñenos, por favor. También vengan a visitarnos aquí en la Corte Vieja, como le decimos. También está la oficina en Patagonia para aquellos que estén en esa área. Visítenos, ahí estamos listos, y esperamos verlos de veras en los tours que se van a estar haciendo para la mina. Yo quedo a sus órdenes. Sandra Moraga, equipo, muchísimas gracias por la oportunidad.
Okay, all right, so that's it. Again, an invitation to the community. If you have any questions about anything having to do with the Hermosa Project and how it affects the community, please come out on Thursday, August 17th to Rio Rico High School. We Love Nogales will also be there, of course. We're gonna, we want to be part of everything that's going on. So we're excited, and we'll see you there.